The observation deck of the Imperial Academy stretched across 300 meters of crystalline composite, offering students an unobstructed view of the twin suns that illuminated the capital world of Vethros Prime. Hundreds of young beings from dozens of species mingled in the vast space, their conversations creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and spoken languages that the universal translators converted into comprehensible meaning. Jake Reynolds stood alone near the western viewport, his datapad displaying the morning's astrophysics assignment. At 17 standard years, he was the only human among the 3,000 students enrolled in the most prestigious educational institution in the Galactic Coalition. His presence here was not the result of his own achievements, but rather a political arrangement between Earth and the Coalition, a symbolic gesture meant to demonstrate humanity's recent admission into galactic society. The human homeworld had joined the interstellar community only 5 years prior, when faster-than-light technology was finally shared with the species that most aliens considered primitive at best and dangerously unpredictable at worst. Humans were the youngest members of a civilization that spanned 47 different species, most of whom had been traveling between stars for thousands of years before Earth even developed written language. Jake had learned quickly that being the lone representative of his species meant enduring constant scrutiny. His classmates watched him with curiosity tinged with condescension, as though he were an interesting specimen rather than a peer. He had grown accustomed to the whispers that followed him through the corridors, the subtle exclusion from study groups, and the barely concealed surprise when he performed adequately in his classes. The sound of approaching footsteps made him glance up from his datapad. Princess Lyra of House Meridian walked toward him, surrounded by her usual entourage of admirers and sycophants. She was Vethrosian royalty, her species having founded the Coalition 6 millennia ago. Her skin possessed the characteristic iridescent quality of her people, shifting between shades of violet and silver as she moved. 4 elegant arms gestured expressively as she spoke, and her 3 eyes gleamed with intelligence and arrogance in equal measure. Jake had been at the academy for 8 months and had never exchanged words with the princess, though he knew her by reputation. She was brilliant, ranking first in nearly every subject, and she wielded her social status like a weapon, elevating those who pleased her and destroying the reputations of those who did not. The princess stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the intricate patterns of bioluminescence that traced along her arms. Her entourage formed a semicircle behind her, effectively trapping him against the viewport. "You are the human," she said, though it was not a question. Her voice carried the melodic quality typical of her species, but her tone made it clear she was stating something distasteful. Jake met her gaze without speaking. He had learned that silence was often his best defense in situations like this. "I have been observing your performance in advanced quantum mechanics," the princess continued. Her middle eye, which Vethrosians used for detailed analysis, focused on him with unsettling intensity. "You struggle with concepts that my people master in childhood. Tell me, human, do your species possess the cognitive capacity for higher mathematics, or are you simply an unfortunate example of your kind?" Several members of her entourage laughed, the sound carrying across the observation deck and drawing attention from other students. Jake felt dozens of eyes turning toward them, eager to witness whatever entertainment the princess intended to provide. He could have responded in numerous ways. He could have pointed out that he maintained passing grades in one of the most difficult courses offered at the academy. He could have mentioned that humans had developed nuclear physics and quantum theory independently, without any outside assistance. He could have noted that he was learning material in his second language, as the academic instruction occurred in Vethrosian Standard rather than English. Instead, he simply looked at her and said nothing. The princess tilted her head, her expression shifting from amusement to irritation. Have you nothing to say in defense of yourself or your species? Perhaps the rumors are true, and humans lack even the basic social protocols necessary for civilized discourse. Jake remained silent. He watched her face carefully, noting the subtle changes in her bioluminescent patterns that indicated growing frustration. Around them, the crowd had grown larger, with students abandoning their own activities to witness the confrontation. Your silence demonstrates either cowardice or stupidity, the princess declared, her voice rising. Which is it, human? Are you too frightened to speak, or too simple-minded to formulate a response? One of her companions, a tall Crethian with scales that gleamed like polished bronze, stepped forward. Perhaps his species simply lacks the neural complexity for rapid cognitive processing. They are known to be slow thinkers. Another voice joined in, belonging to a Felian whose feathered crest stood erect with excitement. I heard that humans still engage in physical violence to resolve disputes. How barbaric. The princess smiled, sensing that her audience was enjoying the spectacle. Yes, I have read about human history. Endless wars fought over resources, territory, and ideology. Your species nearly destroyed itself multiple times with primitive atomic weapons. Tell me, human, does it not embarrass you to represent such a violent, backward civilization? Jake's expression remained neutral, though internally he felt the familiar burn of humiliation. Every word the princess spoke contained elements of truth, facts about humanity that he could not deny. His species had indeed been violent. Earth's history was written in blood, and the scars of countless conflicts still marked his homeworld. Compared to the Vethrosians, who had achieved global peace 4,000 years before humans learned to smelt iron, his people seemed like savage children, but silence, he had discovered, possessed its own power. Words could be twisted, arguments could be countered, and any defense he offered would only provide more ammunition for mockery. Silence gave them nothing to work with. It frustrated them, confused them, and ultimately revealed more about their character than his dot. The princess stepped closer, her middle eye now mere centimeters from his face. I am speaking to you, human. In every civilized society, one responds when addressed by a member of the royal family. Your refusal to speak is an insult, not only to me, but to the entire Vethrosian Empire. Jake met her gaze steadily and allowed the silence to stretch between them. He could feel the tension building, not just in the princess, but in the crowd surrounding them. They had expected entertainment, a verbal sparring match that would end with the human humiliated and the princess triumphant. Instead, they were getting something else entirely. The princess's bioluminescent patterns began to pulse erratically, a sign of genuine anger among her species. Fine, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. If you will not defend yourself, I will ensure that everyone at this academy knows exactly what humans are. Primitive beings who were granted admission to the coalition out of pity rather than merit. You do not belong here, and your silence only confirms your inferiority. She turned to leave, but paused and glanced back over her shoulder. Perhaps I will petition the Academic Council to revoke Earth's educational privileges. After all, why waste resources on a species that cannot even master undergraduate coursework? With that, she strode away, her entourage following in her wake. The crowd dispersed slowly, students returning to their activities while casting curious glances in Jake's direction. Within minutes, the observation deck had returned to its normal state, as though the confrontation had never occurred. Jake stood motionless for a long moment, then returned his attention to his datapad. His hands were steady as he scrolled through the quantum mechanics equations, though his heart still pounded in his chest. He had endured worse than this. The first few months at the academy had been brutal, filled with incidents similar to today's encounter. He had learned that fighting back only made things worse, that trying to defend humanity only invited more detailed critiques of his species' shortcomings. what none of them understood, what they could not understand because they had never experienced it, was that humans carried their history not as a source of shame, but as a reminder of how far they had come. Yes, humanity had been violent. Yes, they had nearly destroyed themselves. But they had chosen differently. They had built peace from the ashes of war, had reached for the stars despite their limitations, and had earned their place in the galaxy through determination rather than inherited privilege. The princess could deride him all she wanted. She could mock his performance, question his intelligence, and doubt his species' worthiness. Her words changed nothing about who he was or what humanity represented. He was here, against all odds, learning and growing and proving that humans could compete at the highest levels of galactic education. His silence was not weakness or stupidity. It was dignity. It was the refusal to justify his existence to those who had already decided he was lesser. It was the understanding that some battles were won not by fighting, but by enduring. 3 months later, the end-of-term examination results were posted in the central class.